Told the Schwartzes was because I was at the Dodger game on Sunday against the Padres with my cousin, and there were too many Padre fans there, especially even sitting in front of me. So I made a little bit too much noise, but it's better than it was yesterday, and I'm sure by tomorrow I'll be good. But yeah, I was making a little too much noise, but it was a really good game, and it was a sweep, and of course they followed that up with losing to the Rockies, one of the worst teams in baseball. So there you go. That's all fun. It's all fun, but that's why I'm fine. I mean, I'm not fine, but I'm not sick, I should say. But that's why my voice is not 100%. But yeah, a lot of traveling over the last month, and to remind people, the book that we read, Daniel, is a strange, very strange book, not just because of its subject matter and because you know, it's it's unique, let's put it that way, and it's in its content. It also is half in Aramaic, which is the only book of the Bible that's in Aramaic, and it's also very, very late in the sense that it was probably written. I mean, we have Dead Sea Scrolls that are probably just as old as the Book of Daniel, so it was written that what it says what for Daniel. For Ezra, yeah. So Ezra is grouped with, and we'll see why in a moment. But I promised people, and we are going to do this right now. I'm just putting us up on Facebook. I promised people that we were going to read a part of Daniel that's not in the Hebrew Bible, that's in the Apocrypha. It's in the Catholic Bible. It's not in the Protestant Bible because, interestingly, the Protestants decided they only wanted books that were in the Hebrew Bible. It was almost as if they said, the Jews know what the books are, and we're going to defer to them, not to the Catholic Church. Now, of course, that was partly because Martin Luther didn't like the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church didn't like him. But because of that, they didn't follow the books that the Catholic Church did, which included these insertions to the book of Daniel. So I mentioned that one of them was a prayer, and one of them is this section, which we call Susanna. So I'm going to show this to you from a site. It's called Bible Gateway, which has lots of different translations of the Hebrew and Christian Bibles. This, of course, is from the Revised Standard Version Catholic Edition. So this is one chapter we're going to look at from the extra parts of Daniel. Um, and what's interesting is that we have it in the Septuagint. So we have this text in the Greek version of the Hebrew Bible. And the Septuagint was written by Jews. It was written by Greek-speaking Jews who wanted their Bible in Greek because that's the language that they spoke. That's the language they spoke in Alexandria, Egypt, where there was a huge Jewish community. It's a language that they spoke in Asia Minor, today Turkey, which had huge Jewish communities. It was the language spoken probably by some Jews in the land of Israel, though most Jews in the land of Israel spoke Aramaic. But people who did business and who lived in predominantly Greek cities, and there were some cities in ancient Judea that had, and that's what we would call it at that time, ancient Judea, who spoke Greek because they were Greek colonies and Greek city states inside the land of Israel. And so a lot of Jews spoke Greek and they wanted a Bible in their language. So the weird thing is that Hebrew was not the language that most Jews spoke. They knew it for prayers. There already were prayers, obviously. There was the language in the temple, which was Hebrew. So the priests would speak Hebrew during their rituals. But on the streets, they spoke Aramaic. If you went out on the street in Jerusalem in the first century, the language that they were speaking on the street was Aramaic. That's the language that the Jewish people spoke. And it's a language that everyone in that region spoke. So the people in Syria spoke it. The people in what we call Lebanon today spoke it. All the people around them spoke it. So it was a very practical language for Jews to speak. So um, the book of Daniel was partly written in Hebrew and partly in Aramaic. And we talked about the fact that it's not exactly the parts that you'd expect. Or maybe you would. I don't know. Maybe you would. But I said we'd look at this part because it's an interesting story. It's also a part of the Bible, even though it's part of the Catholic Bible. Look, it was written by Jews. The story 100% was written by Jews, and it was written by people who wanted to get another point across about Daniel and about Jewish values and things like that. So why isn't it in our Bible? Why isn't it in the book of Daniel we have? And there's a lot of speculation about it. I mean, we don't know for sure because it's, like I said, it's in the Septuagint, which was written right in Greek not much longer after the book of Daniel was finished. Um, um, this part of Daniel was not found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't read by people there. We just don't have necessarily a copy. You can't make that argument. Why it's not in the Bible, we don't know. But it's very possible that the reason it's not in our Bible is simply an editorial decision, literally that somebody cut down the book. There is no question, because again, we have Septuagint, we have some other texts, a Samaritan text of the Bible. We have versions of the Bible that are old, verifiably old, and they're slightly different. Some of them are scribal errors. Sometimes people just missed a line, and that's that happens. I mean, it's sad that it happens. I'm not laughing but people are people and they make mistakes. But some of the decisions were editorial decisions. And in some cases, and it's very possible in the book of Daniel, that people literally said, we're sorry, we don't have room for that paragraph or that page. That story is redundant. We don't need that story. And so they literally cut parts of it out. We know almost 100% certainty that part of the reason why the Bible is the length that it is in certain sections was because editors literally said, we don't have room on a scroll for that. I know that sounds crazy. It's the same reason why newspaper editors, would notoriously cut people's, articles. It's why, listen, in more recent days, I mean, think about it. Almost every form of media that we have is decided not by quality or even the artist had any say in it. There's literally somebody, an editor, who said, sorry, the show is 22 minutes. It's not going in. And look, sometimes it makes the editors, by the way, sometimes editors in film and TV, they're so necessary because the director will not make a cut, will not cut his own stuff. So you need an editor to come in and fix it, right? And to say, you're just going, you're making this worse. So sometimes editors are critical, and they are. But sometimes an editor, especially like on television, was literally, sorry, it's 22 minutes. We got to cut that. I've gotten to watching episodes of The Office, the superfan episodes that are on Peacock, and those episodes are the kind of the unedited versions that they had that are 27 or 28 minutes. And I love The Office, one of my favorite shows. And so seeing the parts that they cut out, sometimes I go, yeah, you didn't need that part. But sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, that's even more cringeworthy. And so it's interesting to see what would have happened if the show could have been 26 minutes or 27 minutes one week and NBC didn't force it to be 22 minutes. So people do this all the time. I mean, we're not aware of it. If we're not in the business, we don't understand what's happening. But, movies that had to be an hour and 40 minutes so that they could be sold to television and put on a 2-hour block. I mean, how many movies could have been maybe a little better? Look, sometimes they're better because an editor did that, but come on, it's got to be most movies and most television was worse because somebody had to cut it to get it into the right format. I mean, how many songs had to be 3.5 minutes so they fit on a 45? I mean, we don't know how much art we've lost because of a format decision. And that happened. I know it's crazy. You're going to say that's not possible. It
Our
is 100%.
canvases, sometimes whole people cut out.
Yep.
Frame.
They'd cut out a piece of a picture because it didn't fit where they wanted to hang it.
Yeah.
Right. So it happened in the Bible. That's the thing that just blows our minds when we really think about it. So what didn't get in for that? We don't know. But we know that the 3 scrolls that we have, right? The Torah, the prophets, and Ketuvim are roughly the same size, right? They're roughly the same amount of columns, right? They fit on to the same, if you will, the same vessel, the same format. If you will, they're an LP or whatever you want to, whatever mode you want to say. The DVD doesn't hold more than that. And they all hold roughly the same. That's not an accident. And that also wasn't God's will. Those were people who said, this is how much fits on a scroll. That's how much you have to work with, period. So in the case of Daniel, yes. So in the case of Daniel, we have a version of it in the Septuagint where roughly, and the thing is that the Septuagint was written right around the time that the book was. So it's not like, well, where was it for 400 years? It was there. Somebody said on Wednesday, not Wednesday, but they said in the year 150, we're cutting it. And somebody else in Egypt was like, we didn't cut it. Yes, and so Mike said that's why we have it. Yes, because it was in the Septuagint. It was cut. We know where it was cut. It was not historic. Like it wasn't like a historical cut. It was a cut that was done around that time, and that's why we say that. I mean, look, we're not 100% sure, but we're pretty sure that's what it was, and the evidence is just there. I mean, like it just makes sense. It's all part of what like what's right in front of us. And as I said, the books of Daniel, I mentioned this a few weeks ago, Daniel, Ezra, and Nehemiah they're not frequently studied in the Jewish community anyways. They're not part of our tefillot. They didn't make it into the liturgy. They're not quoted a lot in the Talmud. They're not like part of the consciousness of like the yeshiva life where somebody's going, oh, we're reading Ezra and Nehemiah now. And by the way, in Jewish community, it's always Ezra and Nehemiah. It's never just Ezra or Nehemiah. It's Ezra and Nehemiah. It's a book that we never separated it. So, but it's just not studied that much, partly because it's very historical, and also to some extent there's a weird thing that happens here. You're going to see it when we get to Ezra. Daniel is problematic because it's got strange prophecies, and it definitely seems like people are like, yeah, but like, are we going to continue this? Look, the rabbis didn't want prophets to run around telling people when the end of the world was going to happen, which is what happens in Daniel. Look, they had Jesus and they had countless people, John the Baptist. They had so many, like we know of some of the people. We don't know the thousands of people that were running around telling people that the end of the world was happening. They didn't want that. And so Daniel just encourages that kind of speculation, right? It's an apocalyptic book. So that makes sense why the rabbis were a little uncomfortable with it. But Ezra and Nehemiah, I think it's not that they're uncomfortable about it, but one of the reasons why they don't deal with it is because you can see in the book, you're going to see it, the process of return, and it's almost like this is how we made the sausage, and people don't want to know that. It's not a book that you walk away from going, yeah, that's an uplifting story. This is a story of like people getting their temple rebuilt and doing it like at all costs, and the costs are sometimes I think they're a little uncomfortable, but there's something about it that is not, it's almost like you're watching people do what they have to do. And I don't know that the rabbi said, look, we're not going to talk about it, but it wasn't helping the situation. And in a way, look, the prophecies of Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Isaiah and all those prophets who talked about the restoration of the kingdom and the temple, which they hoped for, right? Jeremiah talked about it. All these people who, even though they're negative, they hoped for it. It happens during Ezra and Nehemiah. It doesn't quite happen the way they said it was going to happen. I mean, it did a little bit, but it wasn't the restoration that they hoped for, right? There's no new Davidic line. There's no new Jewish authority. We're servants to some extent we're a Persian vassal state. We're not what they said exactly we're going to be. And it's like, this is Ezra and Nehemiah, like, this is what we did. This is what we did to survive. This is how we built it. This is how we got it done. It's not exactly what they said. It's partly, and maybe you could say it's enough that it's a fulfillment of the prophecies. But when you're really honest about it, you're like, well, you promised me, you promised me that you're taking me on a 5-star vacation, and you took me to the Motel 6 in Barstow. And that's what happened. So that's what you told me we were staying at the Wynn in Las Vegas, and we only made it to the Motel 6 in Barstow. That's a good one. I'm going to use that one. That's what Ezra and Nehemiah are. And people, don't want to see that to some extent. I don't want to see it. I mean, I do, but it's one of those things you're going, ugh, I didn't want to know. But before after Ezra and Nehemiah, yes, like 300 years after, not even close to after, like not even in the same ballpark after. Different generations of people. So yes, even though Daniel is set during just before Ezra and Nehemiah, and there is a connection, a deep connection, it was written after. All right. And again, partly we know that because it's written in Aramaic, but it's also talking about things, as we said, some of the events that Daniel talks about, we know exactly when they wrote it. They wrote it during the time of the Maccabees and before the war was over. So we know it was like 164 BC. Like we know within 3 months when some of this stuff was written. Now you could say, well, it's a prophecy, but it's a weird prophecy and it doesn't exactly happen. So if you're going to say, well, it's a prophecy, yeah, but it didn't happen exactly the way he said it was going to happen. He hoped it would happen that way. So why would he keep it? It's clear that he's writing about the events that he sees. All right, so let's take a look at Susanna. This is a short story, but it's going to be like part of what we do, and then we'll get into Ezra today. So this is, but I didn't want to miss this story either. I thought, well, we're already kind of done with Daniel, but there's enough of Daniel that in this, what we're reading today, that we're not totally out of that realm. So this story takes place during the Babylonian exile, in that kind of period before Esther. There's definitely some elements of Esther in this story. But let's take a look at this story. If you've never read it before, it's a very interesting tale from the Jewish standpoint, because it's one that like we knew about. It's not like we didn't know about it, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know if we did. We did do a class on the Apocrypha, and we read the book of Tobit. I think we might have read
I think
this.
we did.
Yeah, I think but you might not have been here because it was when we did the Apocrypha. And so I will tell you that even though this is not in our consciousness, it is definitely in Christian art. Here's a picture, like one of the more famous paintings of this. One of the really great artists of the Renaissance period, who you might know because she's a woman, Artemisia. She painted a version of Susanna. You know about Artemisia? They made a movie about her. She was Artemisia. Yeah, they made a movie about her. I can't remember how long ago the movie came out, but let me see. She did a movie about her. Artemisia came out in '97. So here's her picture of here's her picture of, well, I'll show you the picture after we read it. But let me just tell you this. It was a big story in art because it's got sex in it, and sex sells even back then in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. People like pictures of sex, especially if they can say, I painted the Bible. This is in the Bible. Well, it's in the Catholic Bible. So let's read this story.
There was a man living in Babylon whose name was Joachim, and he took a wife named Susanna, the daughter of Hilkiah, a very beautiful woman and one who feared the Lord. Her parents were righteous and had taught their daughter according to the law of Moses. Joachim was very rich and had a spacious garden adjoining his house, and the Jews used to come to him because he was the most honored of them all.
So again, this takes place in Babylon. That's the setting. The woman is Susanna is the daughter of a guy named Hilkiah. And the setup, of course, is that he's rich and he's very well respected, and he took great care with his daughter, and she's righteous and she knows the Torah. All right, that's the setup.
In that year, 2 elders from the people were appointed as judges. Concerning them, the Lord had said, iniquity came forth from Babylon, from elders who were judges, who were supposed to govern the people. These men were frequently at Joachim's house, and all who had suits at law came to them. When the people departed at noon, Susanna would go into her husband's garden to walk. The 2 elders used to see her every day, going in and walking about, and they began to desire her. And they perverted their minds and turned away their eyes from looking to heaven or remembering righteous judgments. Both were overwhelmed with passion for her, but they did not tell each other of their distress, for they were ashamed to disclose their lustful desire to possess her. And they watched eagerly day after day to see her.
Yeah, not good, right? These are guys who are powerful, who have desires for her. And there you can see, there's a little picture. I couldn't wait to show it to you. There's Artemisia's painting of this. Yeah. It's probably a woman who knew what it was like to have to deal with guys that were creepy. Yep. So there's one of the pictures of Susanna. So they really, they're obsessed with her. They're obsessed with her.
They said to each other, let us go home, for it is mealtime. And when they went out, they parted from each other. But turning back, they met again. And when each pressed the other for the reason, they confessed their lust. And then together they arranged for a time when they could find her alone.
So it's a weird story about 2 guys who were both consumed by passion, and they find out that they're both consumed by passion for the same woman, which I guess you could say that would be weird enough, but it gets weirder, right? And by the way, this story is not just in art, but becomes a story that is played out in other forms of media and plays, in movies, even to this day. This theme of powerful men trying to take advantage of a woman. Unfortunately, seen that happen way too many times.
Once, while they were watching for an opportune day, she went in as before with only 2 maids and wished to bathe in the garden, for it was very hot. And no one was there except the 2 elders who had hid themselves and were watching her. She said to her maids, bring me oil and ointments and shut the garden doors so that I may bathe. They did as she said, shut the garden doors, and went out by the side doors to bring what they had been commanded. And they did not see the elders because they were hidden. When the maids had gone out, the 2 elders rose and ran to her and said, look, the garden doors are shut. No one sees us, and we are in love with you. So give your consent and lie with us. If you refuse, we will testify against you that a young man was with you, and this was why you sent your maids away.
Yeah. So this is wrong on so many levels. It's not even like there's not even a list of how many wrong things happen here. But you can see how wrong, this kind of behavior, it's not like you did one wrong thing, you did lots of things that were wrong. So, yeah, I mean, this is going to wind up being an abuse of their authority, their abuse of power, they're lying, they're bearing false witness. I mean, all this stuff that's happening. I mean, this is literally like the 10 Commandments, like breaking them all in one, breaking a good 3 or 4 of them right away. This is terrible. So this is they say right away what they don't even, it's not even veiled. Like, we have the power to make your life really bad for you. I mean, they say flat out how we're going to get you in trouble if you don't agree. So here's what happens.
Susanna sighed deeply and said, I am hemmed in on every side, for if I do this thing, it is death for me, and if I do not, I shall not escape your hands. I choose not to do it and to fall into your hands rather than to sin in the sight of the Lord. Then Susanna cried out with a loud voice, and the two elders shouted against her, and one of them ran and opened the garden doors. When the household servants heard the shouting in the garden, they rushed in at the side door to see what had happened to her. And when the elders told their tale, the servants were greatly ashamed, for nothing like this had ever been said about Susanna.
So you can see what she did. She said, I'm not going to do it. And I'll take my chances with going to trial, but I'm not going to agree to this. So she shouts, she screams, brings everybody over, and see what happens. And so they immediately do what they said they were going to do. They charge her, essentially with infidelity, right? We've read 27 verses. She's been caught, and did nothing, but she's been caught. That's what happened. Now you're wondering, this is in Daniel. What's going to go on? Why is this in Daniel? Well, you'll see why.
The next day, when the people gathered at the house of her husband Joachim, the two elders came, full of their wicked plot to have Susanna put to death. They said before the people, Send for Susanna, the daughter of Hilkiah, who was the wife of Joachim. So they sent for her, and she came, with her parents, her children, and all her kindred. Now, Susanna was a woman of great refinement and beautiful in appearance. As she was veiled, the wicked men ordered her to be unveiled that they might feed upon her beauty. But her family and friends and all who saw her wept.
So, again, immediately it's telling us they go to court, they go to trial, but she's also, you can see, already showing her dignity and refinement, the fact that she, doesn't want to even be unveiled in front of them. And this is how it's going to play out in public, right? It's going to happen in public. This is not a trial that happens behind closed doors. This is happening in front of everybody, right? Before the people. Here we go. And this is happening in her house, by the way, too.
Then the two elders stood up in the midst of the people and laid their hands upon her head. And she, weeping, looked up toward heaven, for her heart trusted in the Lord. The elders said, As we were walking in the garden alone, this woman came in with two maids, shut the garden doors, and dismissed the maids. Then a young man who had been hidden came to her and lay with her. We were in a corner of the garden, and when we saw this wickedness, we ran to them. We saw them embracing, but we could not hold the man, for he was too strong for us, and he opened the doors and dashed out. So we seized this woman and asked her who the young man was, but she would not tell us. These things we testify.
So you can see that this kind of dramatic thing is, you'll see this in the art. So you see it in not just paintings, but also in sculpture and in engravings. Yep. So you can see this was now what's interesting, of course, is a lot of the paintings is you'll see that she's almost always naked, right? Susanna's almost always naked. And the guys, will be in the scheming in the corner, that kind of thing. But what's interesting is that it shows you that the emphasis was on her nudity, not on the fact that she's an honorable woman who's charged falsely. They're focusing on the sexual part of the story. It's like, things never have changed. It's like, let's get the part that everybody really wants to see is they want to see her naked, and we're going to make her naked by having the guys look at her. And again, even though they say, well, look, the woman's looking directly at us, which means she doesn't understand, that she doesn't know that she's being looked at. I mean, the whole thing is still objectifying her, but whatever. I'm not going to read too much into this other than it allowed people to paint a naked woman and say, I'm painting the Bible. It's in the Bible. So here we go. Here's
The assembly believed them because they were elders of the people and judges, and they condemned her to death. Then Susanna cried out with a loud voice and said, O eternal God, who dost discern what is secret, who art aware of all things before they come to be, thou knowest that these men have borne false witness against me, and now I am to die. Yet I have done none of the things that they have wickedly invented against me.
So she prays, right? She prays to God. And again, she prays assumedly like people hear her. And basically saying these people are breaking one of the 10 commandments, and they're breaking it to a level that is causing her to die if she's convicted, right? So the assembly, it says the assembly believed them because they were elders and judges, and they condemned her to death. So the death sentence was pronounced on her. This isn't like, well, maybe, we'll go to trial. The trial's over. She's condemned. But she prays, and here's why it's in the book of Daniel.
The Lord heard her cry. As she was being led away to be put to death, God aroused the Holy Spirit of a young lad named Daniel, and he cried with a loud voice, I am innocent of the blood of this woman.
And by the way, that's pretty dramatic, right?
Yeah.
He yells out, he's a young guy, and he says, I am not going to be responsible for this woman's death. Wow.
All the people turned to him and said, What is this that you have said? Taking his stand in the midst of them, he said, Are you such fools, you sons of Israel? Have you condemned a daughter of Israel without examination and without learning the facts? Return to the place of judgment, for these men have borne false witness against her. Then all the people returned in haste, and the elders said to him, Come, sit among us and inform us, for God has given you that right. And Daniel said to them, Separate them far from each other, and I will examine them.
So Daniel, he's talks to God and he has miracles, we know, because remember, this comes later, at least where this is put in the Christian Bible, in the Catholic Bible, it comes after some of the other amazing miracles Daniel does. But Daniel is, of course, knows, and God talks to him or whatever, he's answering her prayer to some extent. He's an answer to her prayer. But his method of fixing this is just plain and simple Perry Mason, right? I'm going to separate the witnesses and you're going to see. It's very simple. It's a very simple way that any teacher can do, any parent can do. Whenever you have somebody telling a story and they're both telling a lie, and there's two lies being told, all you have to do is get them. Chances are they are not going to tell the same lie. Real simple method, but that's his method. That's what he's going to do.
When they were separated from each other, he summoned one of them and said to him, You old relic of wicked days, your sins have now come home, which you have committed in the past, pronouncing unjust judgment, condemning the innocent and letting the guilty go free, though the Lord said, Do not put to death an innocent and righteous person. Now then, if you really saw her, tell me this. Under what tree did you see them being intimate with each other? He answered, Under a mastic tree. And Daniel said, Very well, you have lied against your own head, for the angel of God has received the sentence from God and will immediately cut you in two.
Yeah. And what is a mastic tree, right?
Gum tree?
Yeah.
Oh, let's see, it's a joke.
But it is a play on the word to cut. Now, this is, by the way, is one of the reasons we know it's such an old story. I mean, a new story. Like like it was written so much later than other parts of the Bible. It's got a Greek, it's got a play on a Greek word. It's not even Aramaic, this part. It's Greek. And so this shows us, but it also shows us that the critical part of the story and why in the artwork we have oftentimes pictures of trees is because the tree becomes the key piece of evidence. What tree was she under? Now you could say that's pretty weird, right? Like, it's like you're really going to ask a witness what tree they're, like I didn't pay attention to the tree. I was looking at a naked woman. I didn't know what tree it was. Like he doesn't say that. That would be like the normal thing. But because he's so, this is they hang themselves because essentially they say it with such conviction, and they're elders and they're supposed to be so wise and they're judges themselves. What they say can't be it can't be a worthless piece of information. It's got to be critical. So we're not done yet. So.
Then he put him aside and commanded them to bring the other. And he said to him, "You offspring of Canaan and not of Judah, beauty has deceived you and lust has perverted your heart. This is how you both have been dealing with the daughters of Israel, and they were intimate with you through fear. But a daughter of Judah would not endure your wickedness. Now then, tell me, under what tree did you catch them being intimate with each other?" He answered, "Under an evergreen oak." And Daniel said to him, "Very well. You also have lied against your own head, for the angel of God is waiting with his sword to saw you in two, that he may destroy you both."
So let's look at that. So the word oak is actually a play. It's an evergreen oak. It's a play on the word saw. You're going to be sawed in two. So that's another play on Greek words for the trees. So you can see the trees are critical to this story and the word play on the story. Now, there's also something really interesting in this little diatribe of Daniel is that what's this business that you're a Canaanite? Well, that's like, well, you're not even Jewish. Now, he's not saying that because they're not Jewish. He's saying that because you're not behaving like a Jew. You're behaving like a Canaanite. So there's a little bit of a dig on the Canaanites, but it doesn't end there. There's a dig on Israel. There's a dig on Israel versus Judah. Why are people still doing this? Like, why? Now we're saying this is from the 2nd century, 150, 170, somewhere around then. Why are people still doing this? Why are they still talking about the difference, not just between Canaanites and Israelites? There's no real Canaanites anymore. We don't call them Canaanites. Call them Phoenicians by this point. And again, they're Sidonians, or they don't even really call them Phoenicians. They call them Sidonians, or they call them Carthaginians, or they call wherever the Phoenician colony is, they call them by the name of that city. They don't call them really even Phoenicians. They don't use that term about themselves. They call themselves whatever city-state they're from. Coastal city-states, right? These are all, well, not all, but most of the Phoenician cities are on the coast. So all this stuff is going on. There's still a dig not only on foreign people, but on people who are from different tribes. Okay. We'll keep it. Just close the door. If you close the door, it'll be a little bit better. Thanks. We're doing a little plumbing, so I apologize for the sound. If you hear a little bit of the sound, I'll try to keep it down. But what we're dealing with here is a polemic against the Samaritans. When he talks about daughters of Israel that you got away doing this to, he's basically saying you can play this trick on the Samaritan women because they're not like our women. They're not like Judah women. So they're still talking about this. They're still talking about the differences between Israelites and Judites, and specifically now that it's playing out with the Samaritans. We are going to get to that when we read the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. You're going to see exactly what we're talking about here when you see something like this slam against the daughters of Israel. They're really talking again about Samaritans, who by this point, they claim they're descendants of Israel, but they're our siblings. They're our cousins, if you will, or they're Israelites. All right. So this is what Daniel has done. He's exposed that they've lied. One said an evergreen, one of them said a mastic tree. So they've lied. He's caught them in a lie. He's caught them. And he, of course, also slammed them viciously as people who've been abusing their power. Here's what happens.
Then all the assembly shouted loudly and blessed God who saves those who hope in him. And they rose against the two elders, for out of their own mouths Daniel had convicted them of bearing false witness. And they did to them as they had wickedly planned to do to their neighbor, acting in accordance with the law of Moses. They put them to death. Thus, innocent blood was saved that day. And Hilkiah and his wife praised God for their daughter Susanna, and so did Joachim, her husband, and all her kindred, because nothing shameful was found in her. And from that day onward, Daniel had a great reputation among the people.
So they got killed. They got killed just the way they were going to kill Susanna. They got killed. And that is the punishment, by the way. The punishment in the Bible for false testimony is whatever the testimony is that you were going to wind up doing to somebody. If they were going to be convicted, that happens to you now. So that's what happens to them. They get killed. So this is also an origin story about Daniel. This is how Daniel became very well known. So you can hear that drilling in the back. It's kind of like being at the dentist. So I'm going to keep it down and turn it over to Rosemary in a second, and I'm going to mute this mic so that we can go to the actual book of Ezra. So any questions or comments about Susanna before we leave? Nobody has any insights on it? Anybody? Well, if that's the case, we're going to go to Ezra, and I'm going to turn it back over to Rosemary, who's going to kick us off with this. And I will mute the mic again as she reads from the very first chapter, the introduction to the book of Ezra.
In the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, when the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah was fulfilled, the Lord roused the spirit of King Cyrus of Persia to issue a proclamation throughout his realm by word of mouth and in writing, as follows. Thus said King Cyrus of Persia, the Lord God of heaven has given me all the kingdoms of the earth and has charged me with building him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Any one of you of all his people, may his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem that is in Judah and build the house of the Lord God of Israel, the God that is in Jerusalem. And all who stay behind, wherever he may be living, let the people of his place assist him with silver, gold, goods, and livestock, besides the free will offering to the house of God that is in Jerusalem.
Now, this is one of the most important moments in Jewish history. It's recounted in the book of Chronicles, the very end of the book of Chronicles. It is prophesied in the book of Jeremiah, as you can see. Jeremiah had told the people that this was going to happen. Right? This is the line from Jeremiah. It says in the book of Jeremiah, when Babylon's 70 years are over, I will take note of you and I will fulfill to you my promise of favor to bring you back to this place. So about 70 years later, just as Jeremiah had said, the people are now able to go back. King Cyrus says that God, Adonai, right, gave him all the kingdoms of the earth and charged him with building the temple. And he gives them the order to go back. And here's what happens.
So the chiefs of the clans of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and Levites, all whose spirit had been roused by God, got ready to go up to build the house of the Lord that is in Jerusalem. All their neighbors supported them with silver vessels, with gold, with good, with livestock, and with precious objects, besides what had been given as a freewill offering. King Cyrus released the vessels of the Lord's house, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken away from Jerusalem and had put in the house of his God. These King Cyrus of Persia released through the offices of Mithredath, the treasurer, who gave an inventory of them to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah.
Yes, and now we're going to get an inventory of these things. Now, like, of all the things that are in the Bible that you need to have, and we already just told you that there were things that were kept out of the Bible because an editor decided we didn't have enough room. Yet we have a room. We have this list. We had room for a list of gold and silver and precious objects that were returned. Why is this such a big deal? Like, why is this something that has to be in the Bible? And one of the reasons is because this return of the objects from the temple shows a continuity between the first temple and the second temple. Because what is going to be in one temple will not be in the second temple, right? The first temple has things that will not be rebuilt, can't be rebuilt. That temple is nowhere near as big or as grand as the first temple. Now, what's interesting is that King Herod builds a temple that's bigger than both. So eventually there is a temple that's that grand, but not the second temple, not the temple that's being built by these people. But the fact that they had these objects, the fact that they had the things that were in the first temple means that while it's not exactly the first temple, and while, again, maybe they think eventually it will be, but I mean, they don't know. The fact that we can have some of the things that were in that temple mean that there's a continuity and that there's a connection and that this is not just a completely new thing, that there is a piece of what we had before. And the fact that 70 years later that some of this stuff is still available is great. It means that God didn't let this stuff get destroyed. It didn't get all melted down. It didn't get turned into idols. It didn't get turned into, stuff that the king spent on whatever, the king of Babylon and king of Persia would spend it on. That some of our stuff is still real. It's still there. So that was very, very special for them. And it was so special that we're going to have this inventory. And this is what we have right now, an inventory. We're also going to have a list of begots where you also go, did we really have to have a list of all these people's names? You can also say it's like the credits at the end of a film. It's important for the people who lived then. But this is the inventory list. Here you go.
This is the inventory: 30 gold basins, 1,000 silver basins, 29 knives, 30 gold bowls, 410 silver double bowls, 1,000 other vessels, in all 5,400 gold and silver vessels. Sheshbazzar brought all these back when the exiles came back from Babylon to Jerusalem.
Yep. So about 70 years later, these people are coming back, and they're coming back with some of their stuff. Now, what's interesting is that this dude, Sheshbazzar, has a completely Babylonian name. You're going to see a mixture of Babylonian names and Hebrew names. And some of the Babylonian names are completely legitimate, if you will, Jewish names by this period. Because like the name like Mordecai, which is the name Marduk, the Babylonian god Marduk, is completely legitimate. And it's a legitimate Hebrew name today. No one would say the name Mordecai is not a Jewish name. But interestingly enough, at this point, it's still, everybody knows, a Babylonian name. So anyways, you can see that this is what they're going back with: silver, gold, goods, and it also says, by the way, livestock. So, and by the way, I want to point out the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. Remember, Mordecai was from the tribe of Benjamin. Some of the people that got exiled from Jerusalem were from the tribe of Benjamin, because that's predominantly where Jerusalem, the Jerusalem and environs are in the tribe of Benjamin. So that's the end of chapter 1. Now let's look at chapter 2.
These are the people of the province who came up from among the captive exiles whom King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had carried into exile to Babylon, who returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to his own city, who came with Zerubbabel, Jeshua, Nehemiah, Sariah, Realiah, Mordecai, Bilshan, Mispar, Bigvai, Rehum, Baanah, the list of the men of the people of Israel, the sons of Parosh, 2,172. The sons of Shephatiah, 372. The sons of Arah, 775. The sons of Pahat Moab, the sons of Yeshua and Joab, 2,812. The sons of Elam, 1,254. The sons of Zatu, 945. The sons of Zakat, 760. The sons of Bani, 642. The sons of Bebai, 623. The sons of Azgad, 1,222. The sons of Adonikam, 666. The sons of Bigvai, 2,056. The sons of Adin, 454. The sons of Ater, Hezekiah, 98. The sons of Bezai, 323. The sons of Yorah, 112. The sons of Hashum, 223. The sons of Gibar, 95. The sons of Bethlehem, 123. The sons of Netophah, 56. The sons of Anatot, 128. The sons of Azmavet, 42. The sons of Kiryat Arim, Kephirah, and Beeroth, 743. The sons of Ramah and Geba, 621. The men of Mikmas, 122. The men of Bethel and Ai, 223. The men of Nebo, 52. The sons of Magbish, 156. The sons of the other Elam, 1,254. The sons of Harim, 320. The sons of Lod, Hadid, and Ono, 725. The sons of Jericho, 345. The sons of Sanaa, 3,630. The priests, the sons of Yediah, the house of Yeshua, 973. The sons of Emer, 1,052. The sons of Pashur, 1,247. The sons of Harim, 1,017. The Levites, the sons of Yeshua and Kadmiel, the sons of Hodaviah, the singers, the sons of Asaph, 128. The gatekeepers, the sons of Shallum, the sons of Ater, the sons of Talmon, the sons of Aku, the sons of Hatita, the sons of Shabai, all told, 139. The temple servants, the sons of Ziha, the sons of Hasufa, the sons of Tabaoth, the sons of Keros, the sons of Siaha, the sons of Padon, the sons of Labana, the sons of Hagaba, the sons of Hakub, the sons of Hagav, the sons of Salmai, the sons of Hanan, the sons of Gidel, the sons of Gahar, the sons of Reah, the sons of Rezin, the sons of Nekoda, the sons of Gazam, the sons of Uzzah, the sons of Paseah, the sons of Besai, the sons of Asna, the sons of Meunim, the sons of Nephusim, the sons of Bakbuk, the sons of Hakupha, the sons of Harhur, the sons of Bazlut, the sons of Mahida, the sons of Harsha, the sons of Barkos, the sons of Sisera, the sons of Tema, the sons of Neziah, the sons of Hatifa, the sons of Solomon's servants.
Excellent. I was just going to say, Rosemary, amazing so far. Your reading of all of those families.
Thank you.
And those are all, well, we'll get to it in a second when we get to the end. But this is a weird little one that we're going to get to right now.
The sons of Solomon's servants, the sons of Sotai, the sons of Hasaphera, the sons of Peruda, the sons of Yaala, the sons of Darkon, the sons of Gidel, the sons of Shephatiah, the sons of Hatil, the sons of Pokeret Hezebaim, the sons of Ami. The total of temple servants and the sons of Solomon's servants, 392. The following were those who came up from Tel Melah, Tel Harsha, Cheru, Adan, and Emer. They were unable to tell whether their father's house and descent were Israelite. The sons of Deliah, the sons of Tobiah, the sons of Nekoda, 652. Of the sons of the priests, the sons of Habiah, the sons of Hakoth, the sons of Barzillai, who had married a daughter of Barzillai and had taken his name, these searched for their genealogical records, but they could not be found, so they were disqualified for the priesthood. The Shirshata ordered them not to eat of the most holy things until a priest with Urim and Tumim should appear. The sum of the entire community was 42,360. Not counting their male and female servants, those being 7,337, they also had 200 male and female singers. Their horses, 736, their mules, 245, their camels, 435, their asses, 6,720. Some of the chiefs of the clans, on arriving at the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, gave a freewill offering to erect the house of God on its site.
Before we go any further, and again, we got a little bit of noise in the back, so I'm going to keep it short. You can see about 50,000 people came back from Babylon with this group. This is not the only group of returnees. This is the first rounds of return. The people are designated by who their father or grandfather was, the family that they're a part of. But some of them, you saw the whole list of these that are from what city they were from, what town they were from. So it's not just your family, but also from here, sons of Bethlehem, Netophah, Anatot, Asmavet, Kiryat Arim. This whole section is all places. These are not families. So these are people who had either, their distinction now was from what city they came from in Israel originally, not necessarily who their ancestor was. Why is that? Well, definitely there's some questions about genealogy, which they're only going to make an issue of if the person's a priest. It said specifically that if they didn't know that if they were priests, they were disqualified at least until it could be determined whether they were really priests or not. And the only way to do that was through the Urim and Tumim, the magical boxes that would determine God's will. So that means they may never find out whether they're really priests or not. They're saying we basically need to have God tell us whether they're priests. But what also is interesting, of course, is that it talks about the sons of the servants of Solomon. Now, what is going on there? Now, that's an interesting one because what it basically is saying is that Solomon had family members who were not necessarily his children, but children, or maybe they were descendants of him. That's not what I meant to say, but they were not royal members. They were not members of the household of Solomon. And so that is a really interesting little piece there, because it tells us that there were people who were part of the community and they were part of the royal entourage, if you will, coming back, who didn't have ancestry that was considered to be, well, they weren't exactly purebred Israelite or Judite. Because if they're servants, if they're slaves, that means they weren't Israelite. And the rabbis know that. The commentary on this is pretty clear that we knew that they were not, that these people were not full Israelite. They were not fully from the kingdom of Judah in the sense that they were not descendants, purebred descendants of Jews. But yet they're allowed to be part of the community because they're not priests. They're not going to be made priests, but they're also, but they were considered to be, returning refugees. Now, I want to make this clear. One of the reasons why you need to pay attention to that is because what we're going to see when Ezra comes back in a few chapters is that the ancestry was very important. But there's almost this kind of understanding that if you were from Solomon's family, or if you had been Jewish for several generations, we're not going to disqualify you. I want to make this clear. That's important because of what happens in a few chapters. So if you had been Jewish while you were in captivity, if you were Jewish while you were in the Babylonian exile, they didn't disqualify those people. just keep that in mind. Yeah, I say that because not of what you've read yet, but about what you're about to read. Again, the names, I just want to point out one other thing. Some of the names are clearly Hebrew names, right? Names that go back, to the Bible. Asaph, Pashur, Emer, Jediah, Yeshua, any of the names with a name of God in it, with Yah in it, those are obviously Hebrew names. But there's also names that are clearly Persian names and Babylonian names, right? There's clearly names in here where we go like Bigvai, which is Bigvai is a Persian name. It's kind of Asgad, Bebai. These are names that are clearly Persian names. They're the names that we would see in like the book of Esther. So, yeah, there's a mixture of Hebrew names and Babylonian or Persian names. Didn't necessarily mean you weren't Jewish if you had those names. So let's take a look at what happens when these people come home. So far we're told who's coming home, what they're coming home with. By the way, you can see there's a whole lot more asses than mules or horses or camels, right? You can see that most of the livestock that's coming back, I mean, way more, like 10 times more asses than horses, because you could see those were more common livestock. Those were cheaper livestock. Those were what people used more likely. Somebody of any income level, that's the kind of animal that they would use around their farm. Camels, rare, not very common, even less common than horses. Probably only used by tradespeople who are on caravans and who are doing long journeys. Mules, fairly expensive to maintain. And of course, what do we know about mules? They don't reproduce. So they're very expensive to maintain because you're not going to get any value. There's no future value from them. So this is why the ass, the donkey, was such a valuable thing, because it was common. It was cheaper to maintain, cheaper to feed, and was strong enough and easy enough for most people to keep. And you can see it's a major difference. It's not a little difference. It's a major discrepancy between how many of those. So a little bit of information. And again, this was written like right at the time. Like there's not a 100-year, 200-year, like we wrote this down 100 years later. This was written down by the people as it's happening. You can tell. You can tell with not just the level of detail, but the attitude that people have for this kind of stuff, where they're literally reporting on what's happening around them. Just the dates are so precise. The whole thing is just like, it's very precise. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be some weird obfuscation and you got to read between the lines sometimes. But it's very, very much reportage of like, this is what's happening right now. All right, let's look at chapter 3.
When the 7th month arrived, the Israelites being settled in their towns, the entire people assembled as one man in Jerusalem. Then Jeshua, son of Yozadak, and his brother priests, and Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and his brothers, set to and built the altar of the God of Israel to offer burnt offerings upon it, as is written in the teaching of Moses, the man of God. They set up the altar on its site because they were in fear of the peoples of the land, and they offered burnt offerings on it to the Lord, burnt offerings each morning and evening.
All right, what's so important about those 3 lines? I mean, arguably, it's the most important 3 lines that we've read so far today. What's the most important thing about this? Somebody. They started the
They
second.
set the altar up because it says because they were afraid of the people that were already living there.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about this is they set up the altar first. The first most important, like the most obvious, maybe it's too obvious. They set up the altar and started sacrificing before the temple was there. They didn't wait for the temple to be built. Right? They just did it. We're going to start sacrifices, and then we're starting them. We're doing them. We don't have a building, but we have an altar. It's enough. We can do it. And the what we, like I said, this is all very real in real time. That doesn't mean that there's not little secrets here. Well, it's not a secret. They alluded to it. They are scared. It says they're scared of the people. They were in fear of the people of the land. the Amei Haaretz, the people who were already living there, my friends. They were Jews that never left. And these people who came back from Babylon are reinstituting the temple cult the way they want to do it. Now, what's interesting about this is that there's a little secret here, which is that they were Jews that never left Israel. They never went into exile. And what's interesting about these people who are called Amei Haaretz, the people of the land, is that they were legitimate Jews. They just never left. Why did they not leave? Probably because they weren't rich. They weren't part of the priesthood. They weren't part of the royal family. They weren't exiled. They didn't count, really. People of the land doesn't mean that they're, well, doesn't mean that they're not Jewish. It means that they were not part of the system, if you will. They were not part of the power structure. And so these people never left. And what we also know about these people is they never stopped offering sacrifices to God. They may not have done it in the same temple precinct that these people want to do. They may have been doing it in their backyards again, which we know that Jews never stopped doing sacrifices, even when the temple in Jerusalem was going on. They never stopped. But are these people, again, not just Israelites, but Judites? Are these people whose ancestors might have gone to Jerusalem, and they're not? And the people who come back are afraid of them. And they're afraid of them because they know that if they want to do what they're planning on doing, which is rebuilding the temple, these people who are already there need to either be brought into the system or they're going to tick them off. And the latter happens. It's not kumbaya with the people who never left. So what we actually are reading about right now is a weird power dynamic between Jews who never left, who were never exiled, and the people who came back, who had access to money. They were part of the royal family and the priesthood to begin with. And they had permission from the king. They had royal authority. But that doesn't mean that these people who lived in the land hadn't for the last 70 years created their own system. The problem is we don't know their side of the story. We only have the side of the story written by the power elite that came back. Those are the people that we know about. So we don't know what it was like so 50,000 people came back, and let's say there are 500,000 people or 300,000 people at least that either never left or descendants of the people who never left, right? Because now there's been couple generations of kids being born here. These people never left. These are Jews. Some of them are Samaritans, which we're going to read about. Those are people from the northern tribes who they're also a problem. They're maybe even a bigger problem. But we have the side of the story, folks, from the people that, generally speaking, well, it's not, we're hearing from the people who were the people. Well, I guess you could say sometimes these are always the people that write history. I guess, or some people say they're always the people that write history. These are the people who have more money and who have better access. And they're telling the story. And that's the story we have. So we don't know the other side. We don't know the other side, so we have to kind of read between the lines to hear their voices. But at least for at this point, the people who come back are scared of them. And I would assume that they're scared of them because there's less of them. There's less of those people who come back. So we don't know exactly how many people were still living who were not the people who came back, because they didn't write about those numbers. They didn't say how many people were still there. But I mean, imagine it this way. Imagine that could write this. I'm sure there's already a science fiction thing where this has already happened, where just bear with me, right, for a second, because I'm sure there's somebody's going to tell me they already saw this or read this book. But let's just say in the near future, some really, really wealthy people get on a rocket and go to another, they settle another planet. I think actually I've seen this before. And they set up a colony on another planet because they know that this planet's going to hell, meaning the Earth, right? They know the Earth is going to hell. And they say, look, it's kind of a little bit like the Foundation, a little bit. It's a little bit like Isaac Asimov's story. But they basically say, we're going to wait out. Well, Asimov's story, it's like the Foundation people are, the colony people are good people, whatever. But let's just say it's the Elon Musk party that goes up into space and they wait out the next several hundred years. The planet goes to hell. And as the people on this planet, on Earth, who survived the Holocaust, nuclear Holocaust, or the whatever, the apocalypse, if you will, these people from the other planet come back and resettle the planet and say, we're the ones in charge, right? The people who never left the planet would go, what are you talking about? We've been here for the last several hundred years and we've maintained and built civilization and we're still alive. And the people would say, yeah, but you guys are not scientists. You guys are not, and these guys would have better technology and better access, whatever. And they'd say, no, we're coming back and we're going to rebuild the Earth. And the people who were left behind would be like, what are you talking about? You don't have any right to do this. And you could understand the resentment between people who never left and who felt like they were completely legitimate and should be given the control. They're not going to cede control to the land that they never left to these people who just came back. It's not like the people who came back didn't come from this place in the first place. They did. Now, of course, there are people who would say that that's what happened to the Palestinians. But we would say that that's ridiculous. Now, it's not ridiculous if you do a James Michener and say, well, if you do the DNA test on the Palestinians and it turns out that they're really Hebrew, that'd be fine. But they don't believe that. If you believe, as Hamas does, that they have, that Allah gave them the control of that land as Muslims, not as Jews who never left. By the way, that would present Israel with a difficult problem. They don't want to do that. But if they did, there'd be a problem. By that, I mean, if the Palestinians decided, we're going to accept our DNA, we're going to accept the DNA that says that we're actually Jewish, that most of our DNA is not Muslim. Some of it is, some of it's Arab, some of it's other stuff. But if they said, look, we're Jewish by ethnicity, you can't argue with our religious practice because religious practice is a choice. But if they said, we're really Jewish, we just want to be Jewish and live according to the Quran or whatever, then Israel would have a dilemma. The world would have a dilemma because they're basically saying, well, these Jews who came from Eastern Europe, who returned home, and we believe that they're Jewish because their DNA says they're Jewish, but they've come home and they've taken away power from us. What would happen then? That would be a challenge. That would actually be, that'd be a head scratcher. I'd be like, you got a problem there. But they don't want to do that. Palestinians completely reject, and Hamas completely rejects the right for Jewish people to live in this land. So this isn't just science fiction, of course. There's a level to this that is playing out right in front of us. And by the way, it played out a little bit amongst the Jewish community, right? Because we had people who were living in Jerusalem for centuries, primarily Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews, who when the Jews came back from Poland and Russia and Germany in the 1920s and 30s, and even in the 1890s, when those Aliyah people, the first Aliyah and the later waves of Aliyah came back and took control, David Ben-Gurions and the Shamirs and the Begins, when those people from Eastern Europe came there and settled with their families, Ariel Sharon, Ariel Sharon was born in Israel, but his parents weren't. But if you go back and you say, well, those were Russian Jews or Ukrainian Jews, the Jerusalem Jews could have said, hey, look, you Johnny-come-lately Jews, you don't have the power to just run the show, become prime minister and everything else. Now look, part of it was a numbers issue, which was there were so many Jews that came in Aliyah, and especially after World War II, that the numbers didn't make sense for Jews who had lived in Jerusalem and parts of Israel for generations to say, you don't have the power to come here and do that. But it did. It did happen. There wasn't a lot of noise about it because there just weren't so many. Now, again, we know a lot of Sephardic Jews, a lot of Mizrahi Jews came to Israel in later waves in the 50s and 60s and 70s. But those were Jews from Iraq and Jews from Syria and Jews from Yemen that were brought by Ashkenaz. It's not like the Ashkenazi Jews are like superheroes, but they took planes and boats and they rescued those Jews from Arab countries and brought them to Israel. Now they're Middle Eastern Jews, right? They're Jews who are Mizrahi Jews. Many of them spoke Arabic and many of them were very poor when they came to Israel because they had to leave with only the clothes, on the clothes on their backs. But those Jews that came from those places, they were at a detriment for the first 40 or 50 years. And there was a difference between Mizrahi and Ashkenazi Jews in Israel. Today, it's not so pronounced, and there are a lot of mixed families. There's a lot of Sephardic, Mizrahi, Ashkenazi mixes in Israel, so it's not a big deal anymore. But it was until the 80s and 90s. It was still a major issue, and there's still never been a Mizrahi prime minister of Israel. There's been a Mizrahi president of Israel, but there's never been a Mizrahi prime minister of Israel. Every prime minister of Israel up to this moment has always been an Ashkenazi Jew. And they're, by the way, they're Mizrahi Jews who are they're not pleased with that. So there is an element to this that is very, very relevant and is very much something that we can think about today. And again, who knows, maybe even for science fiction, this idea of the remnant that returns and what do they do once they come back. And that is really the theme of Ezra and Nehemiah. What do these people do with the people who live there already, who never left? What do they do amongst themselves? And what do they do to keep their community and to build their community? How do they keep it together? Because, of course, they're going to fight amongst themselves, too. All right. So they are at first they're fearful of the people of the land. The people of the land are Jews. They're not other people. They're Jews. All right. So here's what they did. By the way, wait, hold on a second. One thing. That was a lot of information. So if there's something you didn't understand, please jump in because I want to tell you this is this is a lot of info, and some of it you may not know. Because by the way, this period we don't know a lot about this period other than these books, because this period of Jewish history from about the 4th century, from the return to about the 200s. We don't know a lot about it because it was a very calm part of Jewish history. There were not a lot of wars that, we were involved with wars, but they were wars that we didn't initiate. There were wars between, the Persians and the Greeks, between Greeks and Greeks, between the Ptolemaic and the Seleucid dynasty. There's a lot of wars that were involved, but we're not calling the shots. We're not. It's just Josephus, exactly. If it wasn't for Josephus, we'd know nothing about it. We have these books, and we have Josephus, and that's it. We have no other knowledge of this. A little bit in the books of the Maccabees, but basically we don't know anything about this period. We call it a dark age, but it's not really a dark age. It's only dark age because there's no information. It's dark age from the standpoint of where's the info? We don't have it. So the Persians we were too insignificant for the Persians to really write about us. The Greeks didn't really write about us until Alexander came and it became part of those empires. So there you go. Dead Sea Scrolls don't touch on this stuff. It's like you have to look at Josephus, and Josephus obviously had documents that we don't have, like they're destroyed. So he had histories in front of him, and some of them were Jewish histories. We just don't have them. We know he had them, but we don't really know. And there's a little bit in Philo, who's a Jewish guy who lived in Alexandria, but we really don't know much about this period. There's just no information. So here's what they did, and it's real significant when they did it. Take a look.
Then they celebrated the Festival of Tabernacles, as is written, with its daily burnt offerings in the proper quantities on each day, as is prescribed for it, followed by the regular burnt offering and the offerings for the new moons, and for all the sacred fixed times of the Lord, and whatever free will offerings were made to the Lord.
Now that's really significant. Look when they did it. They did it at Sukkot. They celebrated Sukkot. Again, why is this so significant? Because Sukkot is always attached to the temple. Sukkot is when Solomon dedicated the temple. It was the first holiday celebrated there. I've said this so many times, Sukkot is the time of temple offerings. It is the time you want to be there. It is the time where the temple takes center stage with Sukkot. Now you think it's weird because it's the holiday of a sukkah, of building a sukkah, or it's the holiday of taking the lulav and etrog. Yeah, but it becomes a holiday of the temple, and it's a time of celebrating at the temple. And that is why, as I say every year when we get to Hanukkah, that's why Hanukkah is 8 days, because it's a Sukkot holiday that the Maccabees said when they dedicated the temple, we're going to do it at Sukkot. Why? Because Solomon did it, because they did it during the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, and they did it themselves. Because if you celebrate Sukkot in the temple, you're doing it right. You're doing the thing you need to do. The story of the 8 days of the Hanukkah oil lasting for 8 days is a later story, and it's a story that the Maccabees don't even tell. It's a story the rabbis tell, and it's not a story that the Maccabees are very clear why they did it for 8 days. They did it because they are doing Sukkot when they rededicated the temple. So they went even beyond. They said, well, we missed Sukkot when it happened in Tishrei. We're doing it in Kislev. That was their statement, and that became a holiday. It's the Sukkot of the winter. Yeah. So that's what Sukkot is. Here we go.
From the first day of the 7th month, they began to make burnt offerings to the Lord, though the foundation of the temple of the Lord had not been laid.
And that's Rosh Hashanah.
They paid the hewers and craftsmen with money, and the Sidonians and Tyrians with food, drink, and oil to bring cedar wood from Lebanon by sea to Joppa, in according with the authorization granted them by King Cyrus of Persia.
That authorization, that permit was pretty important. That permit from King Cyrus basically said, we can build. And look who, of course, they went to. The best builders in the region. The Phoenicians, the Sidonians, the Tyrians, modern day Lebanon, right? That's right where Beirut is today, Sidon and Tyre. These were Phoenician cities. And remember, those same people, King Hiram, right? King Hiram is the guy that Solomon used as his wood contractor, right? He was his wood guy. Everybody has you had to have a wood guy back then. You're building a temple for sure. The cedars of Lebanon. That's what they used again. They went back to the original source for where you're going to get really good wood. And you can see they got craftsmen, and they took them and they had the permit and the building permit from their authority. It shows you how important that authority was from King Cyrus. Any questions, comments? You can see that was, by the way, I don't know if the people wanted to be paid with food, drink, and oil, but I guess, I mean, but it says they gave money to the craftsmen, right? They paid some of these other people with food, drink, and oil. And it could be, again, they're not just giving them food for their trouble, but they're exporting food from their land. Because remember, Tyre and Sidon are on the coast. They don't have farms. They don't have olive trees. They're literally like city states on the coast. And so what do those people need? They need food. They need oil. They need they need products that they exchange for this stuff. So it's not like, hey, we're giving them food for their, come over and I'll give you lunch. No, they're taking care of them with supplies, right? And they're getting wood in exchange. And it's not, of course, it's not just wood to build houses, it's wood to build a temple. So this is important.
In the 2nd year after their arrival at the house of God at Jerusalem, in the 2nd month, Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Yeshua, son of Joasadak, and the rest of their brother priests and Levites, and all who had come up from the captivity to Jerusalem, as their first step, appointed Levites from the age of 20 and upward to supervise the work of the house of the Lord. Yeshua, his sons and brothers, Kadmiel and his sons, the sons of Judah, together were appointed in charge of those who did the work in the house of God. Also, the sons of Henadad, their sons and brother Levites. When the builders had laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, priests in their vestments with trumpets, and Levites, son of Asaph, with cymbals, were stationed to give praise to the Lord, as King David of Israel had ordained.
Yep. And so they're going back to the old school stuff, right? We're doing stuff the way we did it when we built the first temple. We're going to have the same kinds of sons of Asaph, right? We're going to have Levites doing their thing. We're going to have Levites and Kohanim. They're all the right people. They're overseeing the work. They're going to be doing all the stuff that we did in the first temple. It's off to a great start. We laid the foundation. We're on our way, right? And he did it quick. Look, second year, we're already up and running. Now, of course, they're already up and running with the sacrifices, anyways. But they were rebuilding the temple. Things look really, really good. It's my setup for. It's not gonna be that way, but it looks really good right now. They laid the foundation. They're ready to go, and things all look like they're moving. They've got their supplies. They've got their people. They've got the Levites. They've got them. They got the Levites, a new crew of Levites, young guys that are going to oversee this.
They sang songs extolling and praising the Lord, for he is good. His steadfast love for Israel is eternal. All the people raised a great shout, extolling the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord had been laid.
And there it is, right? Psalm 106, Psalm 136, right? Kile olam chazdo. We're singing psalms. Kile olam chazdo. So we are celebrating all the priests leading us in song.
Many of the priests and Levites and chiefs of the clan, the old men who had seen the first house, wept loudly at the sight of the founding of this house. Many others shouted joyously at the top of their voices.
Yeah, that's a pretty powerful line. That's a pretty powerful line because there were older guys there who had seen the first temple. They were maybe in their 80s, right? And they remembered the temple. They saw the first temple. No, it says the older people, the people who had seen that, right? They wept. And then there were other people that were shouting joyously at the top of their voices. Assumedly, the younger crowd that was just happy. So it's a pretty emotional sight if you think about it. You're seeing some people who remember what this was like. They're crying as they're looking at this happening again. That they got to live to see this being rebuilt. And then the people who had been promised this, the people who, had been living in exile, they're going crazy. They love to see this. I don't know. Think about when things like that happen, when people in history have been able to witness, history come full circle. And what that means, what that means to them. It's strange. I mean, we've had experiences I've seen in my own life where I've seen people who, have watched their history come full circle. They've been able to see somebody, do something that they did, their grandchild do the same thing that they did, or, especially I see it a lot you'll see it at a bar bat mitzvah. You'll see a kid do something that their grandparent, got to do. It's pretty emotional. And people cry out of joy, but they are crying, right? And again, were some people crying because they also knew that it was not going to be as good as the temple that they had seen before, the one that they had seen be destroyed. And again, just the knowledge of what was lost, comes home. So I mean, you assume that maybe they're weeping out of joy, they're weeping out of appreciation and just emotion of being able to survive long enough to see the people come back to life. It's interesting. I've wondered for most Jewish people who, let's say, they lost family in the Holocaust, it's not like, I've seen stuff in in Germany or Poland. We're talking about doing another trip to Poland and Eastern Europe in June. I'm putting together the final details on it. We went there a couple of years ago. Some of you were with us 11 years ago when we went to Poland, and we were there for the Jewish festival in Krakow, which is beautiful to see that. But there's also something like you can't really, like, as much as you hear Jewish music being played in the Kazimirs in Krakow, that's emotional to hear that, the Jewish music is still can be played. There's the Jews of Poland, 90% of them were murdered, that there's still a chance. But nobody really thinks there's going to be a Jewish community again in Poland. Like, and do we even want that? Do we even want to have a Jewish community in Poland ever again? And I'm saying that as a person who has family that came from Poland. I don't know that, I've been to the places that my family came from, and I'm like, they lived there for hundreds of years. I was like, I don't know that I'd ever want to come back here. Um, it's kind of depressing and like, nah, I don't need to come back here. But, um, but I wonder, and again, it also wasn't our home. I don't have that feeling like I do when I'm in Israel, where I could feel like this is my home. I didn't feel that in Poland, even though my family lived there probably, 700, 800 years, like most of us who have family that came from Poland or Ukraine. So, yeah, I don't know if people get that emotional about coming home to some places. And again, it's one thing like when you come home and watch somebody who goes to Israel for the first time in their lives, or they know that they have family that's gone to Israel and they made Aliyah. It's emotional because they say our families returned back to our homeland, but it's 2,000 years ago. I mean, we know it because we've read it in the Bible, we've read it in Jewish history, we've read it in whatever. We know it, but but you didn't live it. It's not close enough in time that you feel like, oh, my grandparents would be so happy, or I know that what it was like to live there the last time the Jewish people lived in Israel. But you can understand what's happening here, and you can understand it, both the tears of joy of knowing that we survived and we were able to fulfill that prophecy, and at the same time, were people just like, yeah, but it's never going to be what it was. And they weep, they were weeping not just for the fact that it will never be as great as it was, it'll never be the same, but also look at everything we lost. So we did come back, we were here, but look at all my family that was murdered here, or they think about all the stuff that was lost because we lost our homes and our farms and everything else. Look, I mean, that's the reality. And the sad thing is of course, is that there's realities for people who are, who have Palestinian or Arab ancestors too, that lived in some of these places. Again, there's so many ways to look at this and just say, hey, how can we as human beings say, where's our, where does this end of where does the weeping, where is it out of joy, and when is it out of like frustration and like, hey, it's just never going to be the same. But think about that. There's weeping and there's joy. There's both of the things
What
are
is
happening
that?
simultaneously.
What is it from Psalms about? I will reap your
Yeah,
after your shall reap joy.
those who sow in those who sow in tears will reap in joy, right?
Yeah.
So that's that's an important idea, that again, that we can be hopeful. But I do want to say that there's something weird about this scene that, in some ways it's a generational difference, right? In some ways it's like the generation is saying, hey, this is our chance, right? This is like young people are saying, like, we're going to build this. And the old people maybe they're crying out of joy of survival. And maybe they're also saying, yeah, but it's not going to be the same. It's just, okay, how do you read that? And again, like, imagine it. And it's something really powerful about that scene. Yeah. All right. Because I cut this part out. Sorry.
The people could not distinguish the shouts of joy from the people's weeping, for the people raised a great shout, the sound of which could be heard from afar.
So yeah, the sounds kind of get merged together into this sound of weeping and screaming, and it's loud. People could hear it from a long distance away. Kol truat hasimcha. It's a normally when you hear the word truah, you think of a shofar, but the sounds of joy were like the sounds of bellowing out of a shofar. But there was also the sounds of bechi, of weeping. But seems to be combined into one sound. It was a loud sound. All right, we'll read this last chapter, chapter 4, which is, well, you'll see. So we go through Ezra. And as I said, Ezra and Nehemiah.
When the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the returned exiles were building a temple to the Lord God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the chiefs of the clans and said to them, "Let us build with you, since we too worship your God, having offered sacrifices to him since the time of King Esarhaddon of Assyria, who brought us here."
Yeah. So Zerubbabel, who's the head of these exiles, this first group is led by this guy Zerubbabel, which you can hear the word Bavel right in his name. I mean, it's as Babylonian as you can get, raised in Babylon, this guy. So the guys who are living there come to him and say, who are already living there, let's build together, right? Because we worship God too. We've been worshiping God since the time of King Esarhaddon, the king of Assyria, who brought us here, which means they're saying we're not really Israelite. This is the story of the Samaritans, at least according to us, which is that the Samaritans are the descendants of people that are exiles who were brought from other places by the Assyrians. So when the Assyrians destroy northern Israel, right, in about 700 BCE, about 100 years before the Babylonians, the Assyrians, remember, they make their way all the way down. They lay siege to Jerusalem, and then they have to go back. They're not able to capture King Hezekiah. Hezekiah holds out, right? We know about that siege. We read about it in the book of Kings. And the Assyrians, though, destroyed the northern kingdoms. The kingdom that was the headquarters were in Samaria, the northern tribes, the 10, and those tribes get exiled, and the Assyrians settle new people into that area. According to the Bible, they come from areas in Iraq and Syria and Armenia. They bring those people and they settle them in the land of Israel. That's probably true. There's probably some element of truth to that. What's also not true is they didn't exile everybody. They did the same thing that the Babylonians did. They exiled the royalty. They exiled the leaders. They exiled the people who called the shots. Because if we exile those people, then we can call the shots, right? We get rid of the leadership, we'll call the shots. But then we're not exiling everybody. We need workers. We need people who live there. We don't care as long as they're not going to be a problem to us. We need the taxes. We need those people to work the land. We don't want it evacuated. But this idea that these people were the descendants of people that were brought by the Assyrians is not really true. The Samaritans, I'm going to tell you how we know it's not true. We know it's not true, number one, because the likelihood that somebody's going to come to you and say, hey, we want to build a temple with you. We're not really Jewish, but we like God. I mean, it's possible, but it's not likely that people are going to say, hey, we're new to this area or newer to this area than you are. But we know it much more from the fact that the Samaritans don't say this about themselves. They said we're descendants of the northern tribes that never left. And we also know that they're not lying. And the reason we know it is because we have the scientific evidence that they're not lying. We have their DNA. The Samaritan DNA is Israelite DNA. It says Israelite, if not more Israelite, than your and I DNA. And how do we know that? Because they have the Kohanic gene. And they have the Kohanic gene at a level that attest to the fact that they have a common ancestor, which means that the stories of us living in the land of Israel are 100% accurate from the DNA. They have our DNA. Not only do they have our DNA, they marry within themselves so much that when groups want to study DNA that goes back hundreds and in some cases thousands of years, geneticists go to the Samaritans to study them. Now, most Jewish DNA is pretty pure, as Mike Schwartz will tell you. He'll tell you about his Ashkenazi DNA. But I will tell you that's nothing compared to the Samaritans, because the Samaritans' DNA goes back 3,000 years. Your DNA goes back 1,000 years. Well, it's not true. It goes back a couple of thousand years, but the Ashkenazi part of it is 1,000 years. What's interesting about their DNA is it goes back 3,000 years, and because they've married within themselves so much, when we want to understand what any DNA profile looks like in a pure group of people that can go back 3,000 years, we go to the Samaritans. I'm not talking about Jews. I'm talking about geneticists from around the world that want to study an endogamous group of people. They go to the Samaritans. Samaritans also have some inherited genetic diseases that are what you'd expect to be common amongst endogamous, highly endogamous populations. Correct, except this has been going on for 3,000 years. Now, that being said, it's not like they have, that they're, I was going to say that they're hillbillies from Deliverance. They're not. They're beautiful people. Really, I mean, some people say they're very attractive and mentally competent people. It's not like they're not. There are not many, because they've been persecuted for hundreds or thousands of years. But yeah, Samaritans are again, in the Christian Bible, the reason they're called Good Samaritans is because Jesus doesn't assume, and Jesus' group assumes they're going to be creepy people. Now, that only works if Jesus and his followers thought they were creepy people to begin with. You don't have a story of a good Samaritan if you thought the Samaritans were good. So during the time of Christianity 2,000 years ago, Jews also didn't like Samaritans. And I don't mean a Jew, I mean every Jew looked at the Samaritans like they were messed up. One of the reasons why they were messed up is because they didn't worship in our temple. They didn't go to Jerusalem for sacrifices. They didn't believe you had to go to Jerusalem. And that upset the Kohanim. That upset the priestly leadership of our people, who said, what do you mean you don't go to Jerusalem? You go to Mount Gerizim to offer sacrifices? That's ridiculous. Well, it's not ridiculous if you read the Bible. If you read the book of Deuteronomy, if you read other parts of the Bible of the Torah, it's of course you can go to Mount Gerizim. But the Samaritans were not well liked by the Jews, and they were not well liked by Jesus and his group. The reason that they liked him, like this one Samaritan, was because he was good. Most of them aren't, but this one's good. It means some of them can be good. So learn from that there are good people in every group. Okay, I get it. But that's a pretty weird racial profile that you just laid down on people. Yeah, so the Samaritans that live in Israel today, most of them have been, if you will, evacuated into Israel because their homeland, their actual area where they live in Nablus and Shechem, is completely surrounded by Palestinian. It's in Zone A of the Palestinian territory. So they've tried to maintain good relationships with Palestinian Arabs over the last several hundred years. They were sometimes treated well by the Turks and sometimes not treated well by the Turks. But there aren't many left. And in Israel today, they're treated with respect, and nobody treats them poorly. I mean, at least not in the government, or, I don't say every person treats the Samaritan, but they're completely accepted into society. The Samaritans do consider themselves Jewish. The rabbis have differing feelings about how they can be included. But the issue is, if they are not protected, they will be massacred by the Palestinians, who will not make a distinction between them and a Jew. Why? Because they read the Bible, and they don't read the Talmud, but they read the Torah and the book of Joshua. They have 6 books of the Bible that are their Bible. Yeah. And so they They sacrifice, we talked about it. They still sacrifice on Passover. It's one of the things that they do. But here these people are. They come to the people here and say, can we build a temple with you? Can we build a temple with you? And we're going to finish with the response.
Zerubbabel, Yeshua, and the rest of the chiefs of the clan of Israel answered them, "It is not for you and us to build a house to our God, but we alone will build it to the God of Israel in accord with the charge that the king, King Cyrus of Persia, laid upon us."
Sit down. Go back. You're not part of this. I don't like this part personally. This part kind of bugs me because it shows, and by the way, the people who wrote this didn't think they needed to justify this at all. They just, you're not part of this. You're not part of this. It bothers me because I pretty much read this as, no, we're not going to work together. And this is what happens because of it.
Thereupon, the people of the land undermined the resolve of the people of Judah and made them afraid to build. They bribed ministers in order to thwart their plans all the years of King Cyrus of Persia and until the reign of King Darius of Persia.
Yeah, that's what they got for cutting them out, which is that you just heard what happened. They turned to the Samaritans and the people who were there. And again, here they go back. They don't call them Samaritans. They call them the people of the land, people who hadn't left. And again, are they all Samaritans or are these also Judites? Well, here it says that they're, you know, here it says that they're the people of Judah, right? But I mean, I guess some of these people were Judites too. Doesn't matter. The people who lived there already said to the Persians, don't let these people build their temple. And it stopped them. The rest of the years of King Cyrus and the rest of the years of King Darius, they can't build the temple, which means all of that hoopla and that foundation and everything else is sitting there because the permit got held up. And guess what? That happens all the time. It happens here and it happens in Israel all the time. Projects get approved in Israel and all of a sudden they disappear. It happens tremendously in Israel. It's frustrating for developers. It's gotten better, I think, but it's still not great. I was just reading about development in Netanya that got, kind of went down a rabbit hole of bureaucracy. So, question, what happens if they could have all gotten along? What would have happened if these returning exiles and the people of the land could have said, yeah, let's build it together? How would Jewish history have been different? It's not good. And we'll just finish with these last words here.
And in the reign of Ahasuerus, at the start of his reign, they drew up an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. And in the time of Artaxerxes, Bishlam, Mithredath, Tabiel, and the rest of their colleagues wrote to King Artaxerxes of Persia a letter written in Aramaic and translated.
And this is Aramaic.
Aramaic. Rehum the commissioner and Shimshai the scribe wrote a letter concerning Jerusalem to King Artaxerxes as follows. Then Rehum the commissioner and Shimshai the scribe and the rest of their colleagues, the judges, officials, officers, and overseers, the men of Erech and of Babylon and of Susa, that is the Elamites, and other peoples whom the great and glorious Osnappar deported and settled in the city of Samaria and the rest of the province beyond the river, wrote, and now this is the text of the letter which they sent to him. To King Artaxerxes from your servants, men of the province beyond the river. And now be it known to the king that the Jews who came up from you to us have reached Jerusalem and are rebuilding that rebellious and wicked city. They are completing the walls and repairing the foundation. Now be it known to the king that if this city is rebuilt and the walls completed, they will not pay tribute to poll tax or land tax, and in the end, it will harm the kingdom. Now, since we eat the salt of the palace, and it is not right that we should see the king dishonored, we have written to advise the king of this, so that you may search the records of your fathers and find in the records and know that this city is a rebellious city, harmful to kings and states. Sedition has been rife in it from early times. On that account, this city was destroyed. We advise the king that if this city is rebuilt and its walls are completed, you will no longer have any portion in the province beyond the river.
Wow. So according to this, and again, this letter could have really existed, the Samaritans and the people of the land just told the Persians, if you let the Jewish people rebuild the temple and rebuild Jerusalem, it's going to be a problem for you. They'll be rebellious, and you know it because all you have to do is look back at history and see it. And so this is what he does.
The king sent back the following message to Rehum the commissioner and Shimshai the scribe and the rest of their colleagues who dwell in Samaria and in the rest of the province of beyond the river, greetings. Now the letter that you wrote me has been read to me in translation. At my order, a search has been made, and it has been found that this city has from earliest times risen against kings, and that rebellion and sedition have been rife in it. Powerful kings have ruled over Jerusalem and exercised authority over the whole province of beyond the river, and tribute, poll tax, and land tax were paid to them. Now, issue an order to stop these men. This city is not to be rebuilt until I so order. Take care not to be lax in this matter, or there will be much damage and harm to the kingdom.
Yep. They pulled the plug on the construction.
When the text of the letter of King Artaxerxes was read before Rehum and Shimshai the scribe and their colleagues, they hurried to Jerusalem to the Jews and stopped them by main force. At that time, work on the house of God in Jerusalem stopped and remained in abeyance until the 2nd year of the reign of King Darius of Persia.
Yep. So you saw what happened. The people who were living there got the Persians to pull the plug on the permit because they said, if you let these people join together and build this, you're going to have nothing but problems from them. And of course, they did the record, they did the research. They asked the Babylonian, scribes and people who knew what had happened when the Jews were under the Babylonian authority. Oh yeah, they don't make very good subjects, these people. And so it worked. Yeah, they were able to stop this construction. So this wonderful building project, they pulled the plug on it. And that's where we're going to leave off until next week. Now, I already told you they do get it built. It's not going to ruin the happy ending to this story is still out there. But you can see human behavior hasn't changed a whole lot. When you piss somebody off, don't be surprised if they try to get you back and they make your lives hard. And this is exactly what happens here. These people, they stop the progress. They stop the possibility of getting this thing done. And needless to say, if you don't like the Samaritans, maybe there's a reason for it. They did not get along, at least couldn't get along at all here at this point, because the Persians, again, listened to them and stopped it. All right, we will see you next week. And in the meantime, the next time we get back together next week, we will actually be in the month of, we'll be in the next month of Elul. It'll be the last month of the year as we get ready for Rosh Hashanah. So it's definitely appropriate in the coming days to start wishing people a happy new year and to look forward to a better year ahead on the calendar. But thank you everybody for being here, and we hope to see you tomorrow night for the Wednesday night class, the Jewish Journey, which we just started, and you can watch the first class. And tomorrow night we're talking about God. We don't talk a lot about God sometimes, but we will tomorrow night. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Take
Hi,
care.
everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Rosemary.